service. Easy for listening and it's able to do it. Easy for dancing. I'm not a great lover of cats. That's my fear. You're a disgrace, you are. Not me. That's my fear. You're a disgrace, you are.
Hello and welcome in another episode of Have Your Say, Shadowboxing. Today my guest in WTV studios, Dr. Michael McKibben. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
Michael is a chiropractor, probably, of 50 years of experience.
50 years. Yep.
But make it sure, you are not a medical doctor, Michael, are you?
No, absolutely not.
You're a doctor of chiropractic.
True.
Michael, tell us something what is chiropractic is mean.
Okay, in simple terms.
Yes.
The bone gets out of place and loses movement, irritates the nerve and changes the way the master control and coordinating system works. So wherever the spinal nerves go may be altered by the way that functions. Some things are much more common than others and some are very rare.
So that's affecting all our life, all aspects of our life, if something is out of the right,
many
out
different
of the
ways,
germs.
yeah.
So, Michael, you are born in WA or?
No, I was raised in Ballarat in Victoria and we enjoyed ample supply of rain there and I really enjoy Perth. It's just bloody marvellous. It's a great place to be.
And Michael, how do you get into chiropractic?
Car accident, extreme fatigue, on the point of fainting all the time. And I went to the doctor, waste of time, but a good bloke. He was a member of our church and a fellow who I thought was a pretty good fella. And, but all he did was try to treat the symptoms and couldn't figure out what the cause was. And somebody said, why don't you go and see a chiropractor? And I did, and the remarkable result I had was the symptoms cleared up.
And where have you seen that chiropractor?
Over in Ballarat.
In Ballarat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you decided that's something which may interest you to get your hands on patient and treat them?
What it was he said that he worked with the power that made the body and heals the body. He was a servant, not the master. Yeah. And
Yes.
the idea of being able to spend a lifetime doing that with the type of results that I had was really interesting. I interviewed a lot of his patients and found out whether they were doing any good or not. And I went back and told the GP, he was a member of our church, that we'd had very satisfactory outcomes. He blew me up, was really aggravated about it, and said chiropractic was baloney, that
Yes.
they believed in a universal intelligence, an innate intelligence, and the power that made the body heals the body. Well, I thought to myself, I've never met a medical doctor who can cure a corpse. If the power ain't there, it's not going to work.
Yes, that sounds logical, Michael. So where you learned your trade?
I went to the trade school of Davenport, Iowa.
To the very school where chiropractic has been invented 120 years ago.
Absolutely great place to go at that time. It was the end of the era when they were jailing chiropractors. So to go and get sitting on a course where you were told how to stay out of jail was very interesting. Yeah, it was really good.
And then when you graduated there, what was the next step?
Well, I worked briefly for a time with a chiropractor, and then a friend of mine had come to WA, and they'd recently registered chiropractors in around '66, and it was a very good place to come to. So I came and set up, and I've been pretty well in the same area for 50 years.
Where is the area you're working from?
I work in Attadale.
Attadale,
Yeah.
so you got your clinic in Attadale for
Yes.
almost 50 years.
Well,
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I still enjoy it.
That's very good to hear.
Yeah.
So what is the ins and outs of chiropractic? You got some of these things on the table. Tell us something. How does it work?
Everybody's got a spine, and it does far more than keep your brains away
Some
from
of
your
the
backside.
politicians not.
No, spineless, yes. And if I may, there's a vertebra, a disc, a vertebra, and nerves come out between. We're supposed to stay in good shape and keep a fat and happy disc. Can you pass me that, please?
Yes,
If
Michael.
the central substance of the disc, called a nucleus pulposus, comes under excessive duress because the joints lock up at the back and it carries weight in the wrong way. It doesn't last as long as it should. So they deteriorate, and as they deteriorate more and more, the spine becomes less functional. Now, there was no WorkSafe in the 60s.
Yes.
The Italian fishermen, the Yugoslav market gardeners, nose down, tail up all day long. The woman said to me, she put her back out throwing a bag of spuds on a truck. And I said, what layer? And she said, second layer. One woman on her own. They worked very, very hard. And those people had this sort of thing. Well, nowadays that doesn't happen.
So that is a damage, physical damage.
Bad damage.
In physical damage.
Yeah, physical damage.
In the spine. Yes.
And when WorkSafe came in, and all of the lifting devices, this generation of people don't have that. I would see far more people with emotional stress-related disorders than I would from extreme heavy lifting. Yeah.
So how the emotional stress-related disorder is getting to the chiropractic or with the spine? Is there any connection on that?
Oh, absolutely.
What is it?
Okay, the individual gets tense because of stress, and the stress tightens the neck, upper back, and if it's really bad, they can feel it all the way down their lower back. They'll come in and tell you, I can feel that's gone all tight and in spasm. The dogs I adjust that come from dog refuge, who have been through a rough time, when you palpate their spine, they're also quite tense, and after they're adjusted a few times, it relaxes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But humans are like that,
yep.
And dogs are like that.
But the same principle.
Same principle, yeah.
So if someone is go to your clinic and say, I got all this pain in the back and around my shoulder, so that means it's stress, as you said, right. What can you do? Okay,
I can locate and adjust the where the joints are locked up, and the person can feel relief from that. But say the mother's got two kids, one's a drug dealer, the other one's on meth, and there's heaps and heaps of problems. Yeah, I can't solve that.
Yeah.
So I can.
So the stress will stay, but the pain may relax a little bit.
Yeah, I can treat the symptoms, not the cause.
Not the cause.
Yeah.
So how can we have stress-free life in the 21st century? How can we live stress-free life?
Well, you get very few people who have total stress. Think of it as a loading on a fail-safe mechanism. Say the power surge was going to come through this building and it was going to blow lights and do damage, but it hits the switch box, the fuse, and that safety mechanism fails, and so the building's protected. Well, the subluxation does the same. The bone gets out of place, loses movement, irritates the nerve, and when it's released, then the symptom diminishes or goes.
You got a few books in here. My favorite is Deadly Medicines and Organized Crime. What made you interested in deadly medicine and organized crime?
Well, go back a bit. I was looking for changes to the way the government handles chiropractic, and I went to meet the Minister for Health, and the liaison between the AMA and the Minister for Health was there. And when I suggested that we should be able to work within public health, he said you can't do that because of a question of risk. And I'd never thought much about risk. Now we're talking me being in practice for 40 years or something, and I hadn't thought much about it. So I started to read up on it. I had read where Ivan Illich had written a book in, I think it was 75 or something, that book
That's
there.
the first one.
Yep. And he was the one that coined the term iatro, meaning physician, genesis, mean create. Harm arising from medical treatment is distinct from the patient's disorder is called iatrogenesis.
Iatrogenesis.
And everybody I meet says, I don't know what it means.
Never heard.
Because it's not part of the public conversation.
Why is that?
Because the media never talk about it, the politicians never talk about it, and the real problem with it, most people wouldn't have a clue about. Now, I'm not saying societies are dumb, but most people really don't think much about this, and I hadn't. Yeah.
So iatro,
Iatro means physician, genesis means create.
okay, so this iatrogenesis,
Harm arising
what
from medical
is-
treatment.
what does it mean in plain layman language?
Harm arising from medical treatment is distinct from the patient's disorder. So say
So
George...
if any medical treatment which is go wrong,
Yeah.
it's part of that phrase
Yeah,
and ends up with death, of course. Is
yes.
it? Yes. So
And
these
there's
are
a
the
whole-
victims of bad practice and bad medicine.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. So that's what we will discuss shortly. But go in to the statistics of Australia. We know one thing for sure is 143,473 people die every year in Australia. It includes all the deaths. And if you're looking at the reason of deaths in Australia, we can discover lots of things involved. Circulatory system, cancer and tumors and accidents and assaults, other internal causes. Then we got nervous systems, which ends up with that. And we got respiratory, digestive, and so on. But I couldn't read that strange word of yours in this list. So you say people dying because of bad medicine and bad treatments. So where are they listed amongst the deaths?
They aren't.
They're not listed.
No.
Why?
Well, this is the funny part. You see, first I didn't know about iatrogenesis.
Yes.
And so I chased up about that. A fellow by the name of John Archer, an investigative journalist, had published a book called Bad Medicine.
That's in Australia.
Yes.
So
And
that is the book of John Archer's Bad Medicine.
he made the crazy claim that there were 50,000 Australians die per year as a result of medical treatment as distinct from their disorder.
So 50, more than 50,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I rang his publisher and said, I need to talk to John. I got his mobile number and I said, hey, your statistics are over the top, they're too many. And he said, not my statistics, read the references. They're out of medical literature that has to do with harm arising from medical treatment.
So medical literature is dealing with this issue, but the statistics of medicine, not.
No. So
Okay, that's strange. But this book of Bad Medicine by John Archer, been written 20 years ago.
yeah. Well,
Has anything has changed since 20
damn
years?
sight more population, more old people, more people dying. Yeah.
In here, in Australia. And what's happening in the world? Where are we in the world list?
I don't
Or
know.
none of the countries got statistics on that disease?
No. I contacted colleagues in Canada and some officials in America. They can't. I'll tell you why. This is interesting. The World
On
Health...
that note, before you're telling the story, which is very interesting, we're going for a short break.
Yeah.
And after the break, we're coming back with one-on-one shadow boxing. Don't go anywhere because you will learn lots on bad medicine and the organized crime. Hello and welcome back to One-on-One Shadow Boxing, Have Your Say. My guest in the studio of WTV is Dr. Michael McKibben. Michael, we're back from the break and we are just interrupted your very interesting statement of why we couldn't find people dying from bad medicine and bad treatments, mistreatments in hospital, in the statistics of deaths in Australia or elsewhere. So tell us the story, Michael.
Okay, that was in the Sydney Morning Herald. And it was by Amy Corduroy, because she's a health writer. And I rang her up and said, hey, Amy, you've missed out on reporting an epidemic. And
She was wondering what you're talking about.
she didn't know what iatrogenesis was. She was a health writer. Yep. So
In Sydney.
in Sydney, yeah. So I then started to look at how the hell could you conceal that many deaths. Now, Carmen Lawrence had put out the figure of 18,000 in hospital deaths, and various other authors had spoken of thousands, and yet there's no thousands in that graph you're showing. So I contacted the Australian Bureau of Statistics.
Yes.
And when Prime Minister Rudd was in, I contacted his Minister for Health. And she came out with the great figure that there were 259 iatrogenic deaths in Australia that year.
259.
You notice the difference, don't you?
It is a big difference. I thought
Yeah.
250,000. No,
259.
59.
So how do they get to that? The World Health Organisation puts out guidelines on how to sign death certificates.
Yes.
And there's a statement there where they're permitted to substitute or state the cause of deaths. For instance, I had a patient who overdosed on lots and lots of painkillers, and he died as a result of that. Well, on his death certificate, they put kidney disease.
That's very obvious.
So
yes.
they're transferred from one cause of death to another. Yeah, and when I asked the Minister for Health and a lot of other people, what are your figures on iatrogenesis? Nobody really has anything. Whether it's the Commission for Safety and Quality in Healthcare, who should have it, they don't know.
And do they really don't know, or they're just bullshitting?
They can't know, because if everybody is shifted across to a non-iatrogenic cause,
Then no one knows.
yeah, no one can know. So that's how doctors bury their dead.
So what's happening in Canada and the United States?
Because it's World Health Organisation, it's everywhere. No country can define its own iatrogenic epidemic.
So where are we gonna get the numbers then? How can we convince ourselves this is an epidemic, which is a real one?
Okay,
Yes.
if you read up on books like Archer, and there's a whole pile of them, there's a lot of people looked at it or asked Dr. Google, and you'll see that there's a huge number, and you put in iatrogenic epidemic, and it'll come up with a whole lot of answers. Or you can look at a journalist assignment. That's an article that I put up for journalists and sent it out to all of the media I could think of over and over again, and I've invited anybody who writes an article about illness and death to have a look at it. Nobody ever responded.
What do you think why, Michael? What do you think why they didn't respond? Because they should not part of the bad medicine or the big industry of medicine.
Yeah.
They're not doctors, so why didn't they respond? What do you think? What's the reason for that?
I think they've got a vested interest in keeping a lid on public awareness of iatrogenesis. And that's a tragic thing to say, but it didn't matter whether I saw the Attorney General, Darryl Williams, or Carmen Lawrence when she was Minister for Health. I went and met with them and talked to them about it, and nothing. I talked to my local member about it, and he said, well, it's not an election issue. And I was, what's an election issue? And he
People
said,
dying has never been an election issue.
well, he
Except
said,
if they're dying probably on the roads or they are terrorists and killing some people, but they are not hundreds of thousands, thanks God. But when people dying in big numbers, 50,000 and more, because of something which we can sort of, prevent, they're not interested. That's unbelievable, Michael.
the fellow on that book makes a comment
Deadly medicines and organized crime. What's the comment?
That it's extraordinary that there are thousands of people die from painkillers.
Yes.
And nobody makes any effort to do anything about it.
But if someone is died from...
Well, 9/11, 1,911 people, I think it was, and there was sensational,
coverage, yes.
coverage, yeah.
Of course. So what's the role of the big pharmaceutical industry members of these, deadly medicines and organized crime?
$7 trillion, world industry.
$7 trillion per year.
Yeah. And they're looking after their interests by not having people be aware of it. Now, I would be dead but for medicine. I would be blind but for medicine, for the bright side of medicine. But the dark side of medicine I fear greatly.
So what's the difference between the bright side and the dark side, and who is producing which?
Well, I think there's a lot of good doctors out there, and
Yes.
a lot of really genuine people, but there's also a lot of villains somewhere in the scene, because it should be common knowledge that people know what iatrogenesis is, and that they take more care of their health. As Gandhi said, something like, health is everything in the final analysis.
How can we have healthy life? And how can we avoid the deadly or bad medicine and the influence of the pharmaceuticals?
Oh, well, firstly, don't smoke. Secondly, don't drink to excess. Keep your weight down. That type of thing will add an extra 10 years to a person's life. We're all going to die, but there's certainly choices that we make. Many people would rather die than think, and many do. So the first rule is think. And the first rule about iatrogenesis is become informed. I'm fully supportive of medicine on its bright side, but I think people need to be aware of what can happen when it goes wrong and avoid being involved in that. Yeah.
So how education can help?
Yeah. Well, I think...
And where can you start education?
Buy books and read.
But people are not reading now. They are all on their devices and they're all exchanging, you know, these emails and text message.
So they bring up iatrogenesis and have a look at it. There's plenty of information about. Yeah.
Such pages. What's in your Facebook page? You got that topic on?
I haven't got Facebook because too many people bothered me.
So,
no, but it's up on my webpage. Yeah.
Seriously, how can you educate the young people who are not really know anything about it and probably they're not really interested? But if we not have the statistics and we're not sort of conditioned to accept anything outside of these statistics, how can this be broken, you know, that cycle of silence?
That's a very hard thing. I've tried, in 2000, the West Australian Chiropractors Association put in a submission to the WA Minister for Health that there was a real problem. And the immediate response was what's just the same as happened in the last 16 years, nothing. I circulated that out to the media, nothing. I circulated that out to federal and state politicians, nothing. Yeah.
You think that there's somewhere is a conspiracy to form silence?
I don't know.
Or the wall of silence is...
Well, you'd think the ABC or SBS would be adequately independent, but I've sent the information to them, not a thing. It's as though it's not happening. Even, you know, like Four Corners and so on, I've never taken any interest in it. I don't know why. And don't forget, I'm a chiropractor. I'm out of the circuit. I'm just an observer.
And the chiropractic could not be still practiced in your medicine, with the hands-on, could not be practiced with a government subsidy? Or you say the private you can practice, but you couldn't part of the... What was the wording?
Okay, when you go to prison, I can't come and see you. If you run away and join the army, you've got to get the doctor's permission to be able to come and see me. Yeah? Once you fought for Queen and Country and you come back, if you want to claim under Veterans Affairs, once again you've got to get the doctor's permission. If you go into hospital, I can't come and see you. That's all public health. My patients can't claim Medicare. That again is public health. We're not allowed in that.
And insurance, health insurance not covering?
Private health insurance does, very generously.
It covers the chiropractic.
Yeah.
So that's the only way people really can get into that practice.
Yeah, it can be reimbursed, yeah.
Yes. So how expensive is chiropractic compared with other medical treatments?
The guy yesterday said to me that he had a device put in his back, in his just under his rib cage,
yes,
and some sort of device inserted in his backside, and that was $50,000 to stop his back pain.
And it stopped the back pain?
It's working very well. It's about his fifth operation.
Fifth operation.
I would say most chiropractic patients will come in, have a series of adjustments, their discomfort goes, and there's 3 phases. Your initial phase is to see if it's going to work or not. If it doesn't, well, you just send them off to a vet and they'll put them down. And the second phase is you try and get them to lose weight and whatever else to improve their health. And then if they want to go on to maintenance, they can. So it depends on what the person wants to do. If it's just acute care, I was a whoosher when I first went to a chiropractor, yeah?
Yeah.
As soon as I felt better, whoosh, I was gone. Yeah. Well, you get a fair few patients that do that.
So the maintenance is very important.
I consider it is. A lot of people who are health conscious will use that and stay healthy as they can. And these are people who, when you talk to them, don't smoke, don't drink to excess, are selective about what food they don't eat and what food they do eat. They get regular exercise and they stay away from stinking thinkers. Yeah.
So regular exercise, just to finish off the topic of chiropractic, and the medicine, and the bad medicine, how important is exercise in life?
Hey, somebody sits at a computer all day, they get up in the morning, they get in, have their breakfast sitting down, they get in the car, drive and sit down, they sit down all day long, and then they get in the car and come home and sit down and have dinner, and then they sit down and watch telly and go to bed. That's life for some people, eh? But you've got a heap of people now that'll go to the gym and work out and get fit and be healthier. Yeah, it's very good.
Michael, it's a pleasure talking to you.
I appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. And don't forget, next week, same time, same channel. Have your say, shadowboxing.